Bill Gates made a statement back in 1999 that has aged badly. He stood in front of reporters and said flatly that Linux was no threat to Windows. He argued that Linux lacked central control, proper drivers, a real GUI, and the kind of polished businesses needed. He was not entirely wrong at the time, but that was 1999. This is now. Right now, one of the biggest laptop brands in the world is watching its own customers pull Windows off their machines and replace it with Linux. ASUS is not a fringe manufacturer. It is one of the largest laptop and PC hardware companies on Earth. Its Republic of Gamers brand, ROG, dominates the performance laptop segment globally. Walk into any electronics store, open any major retailer's website, and ASUS hardware is everywhere, from sub-$500 budget notebooks all the way up to machines pushing $2,000 that compete with the best portable gaming hardware money can buy. For decades, ASUS built all of that for Windows. That was the unspoken contract. Every piece of firmware, every keyboard shortcut, every software utility, it all assumed Windows was underneath. If you wanted to control your fan curves, manage your RGB lighting, switch your GPU between modes, or cap your battery charge to extend its lifespan, you opened an application called Armoury Crate. It ran on Windows. If you were running Linux, you were largely on your own. That assumption held for years. And then, quietly, it started to break. Linux is not a single product owned by a single company. It is an open source operating system developed collaboratively by thousands of contributors. For years, ASUS hardware on Linux lagged badly. The company did not officially contribute Linux drivers. If you wanted your ROG laptop's fans to behave properly, your keyboard lighting to respond, or your dedicated GPU to switch modes cleanly, you needed unofficial community tools. And the person who built those tools is an independent developer named Luke Jones. But Luke Jones has been pushing his work not just into community repositories, but directly into the mainline Linux kernel itself. According to Phoronix, the leading publication covering Linux hardware, a major new driver called ASUS Armoury was queued for the Linux 6.19 kernel release in November 2025, developed primarily by Jones. The driver was described as offering a cleaner, well-defined API compared to the ad hoc approach that had existed before, with better support for BIOS-level hardware features on ASUS gaming laptops and handhelds. The driver was merged in the mainline kernel, Linux 6.19, released in early 2026, shipped with the ASUS Armoury driver built in. According to the Arch Linux wiki, this means users with kernel 6.19 or later may no longer need to install the community's custom kernel patches at all. The support is simply there, delivered automatically through standard system updates. When something lands in the mainline Linux kernel, it ships to hundreds of millions of users without them doing anything special. They run their regular updates, and suddenly, their ASUS hardware works better on Linux. No press release from ASUS, no product announcement, no marketing campaign. Just thousands of lines of carefully reviewed code embedded into the foundation of the open source world. According to reporting from WebPro News citing the patch series reviewed by Phoronix, the scope of these changes covers better LED and RGB control on gaming laptops, finer control over fan behavior and thermal management, improved handling of ASUS's diverse hardware variants across different ROG and TUF models, and TDP adjustments, the kind of power limit tuning that Armoury Crate handles on Windows, but that was previously unavailable on Linux. There is another ASUS story unfolding in parallel, and it is even more visible. The ASUS ROG Ally is a handheld gaming PC. It launched running Windows 11, and for a lot of users, Windows 11 on a handheld gaming device has been a frustrating experience. Valve's SteamOS officially expanded its support to include the ROG Ally and other AMD-based gaming handhelds as part of the SteamOS 3.7 release. Valve posted installation instructions directly. Multiple outlets tested it. A Tom's Guide writer ran the comparison directly and found that on the ROG Ally X, running SteamOS instead of Windows 11 produced a roughly 15% improvement in frame rates in some tests, alongside a 22% improvement in battery life. That is not a marginal gain. That is a meaningful real-world difference. The ASUS Linux story would be interesting on its own, but it is happening against a backdrop that dramatically amplifies its significance, and that backdrop is entirely of Microsoft's making. On October 14, 2025, Microsoft officially ended free security support for Windows 10. Every machine still running. Windows 10 stopped receiving the security patches that protect against newly discovered vulnerabilities. Microsoft offered a paid extended support program for consumers, but only through October 2026. After that, the door closes permanently. The core problem is that Windows 11 came with hardware requirements that many perfectly functional computers cannot meet. For users, the choice became stark. Buy a new computer, pay Microsoft for temporary coverage, or find a different operating system. And Linux distributed itself directly into that gap. Zorin OS launched version 18 on the day Windows 10 support ended. Its developers reported reaching 1 million downloads in just over a month. Approximately 78% of those downloads came from Windows devices. For most of the last 20 years, gaming was the unbreakable argument for staying on Windows. The games were built for DirectX, Microsoft's graphics technology. Anti-cheat systems required Windows. The entire commercial ecosystem was Windows first, and if you needed it, you needed Windows. That wall has been under sustained attack, and Valve is the company doing the attacking. Valve's Proton compatibility layer allows Linux users to run a large and growing library of Windows games without Windows. The Steam Deck brought this technology to millions of users in a consumer-friendly form, and it worked well enough that Valve extended SteamOS to AMD-based handhelds, including the ROG Ally. According to the Steam hardware survey, Linux usage among Steam users reached 3.05% in October 2025, representing the highest ever recorded level and a 52% increase from the same period in 2024. 3% is still a small number in absolute terms, but among PC gamers who are typically early adopters and tech-aware, that number is meaningful and growing fast. And for ASUS ROG users specifically, the combination of improving kernel-level hardware support through ASUS Armory, better Linux gaming compatibility through Proton, and the option to install SteamOS on the ROG Ally directly has removed what used to be the two main barriers: hardware that didn't work properly and games that wouldn't run. Limitations remain. Some multiplayer games with aggressive anti-cheat systems, certain titles in the Call of Duty franchise, and some other competitive shooters still do not work on Linux. Firmware updates for ASUS devices still primarily flow through Windows-based utilities. If you rely on specific professional software that has no Linux version and doesn't run through compatibility layers, Linux may still involve significant workarounds. These are genuine constraints, but the list of reasons to stay exclusively on Windows is shrinking, methodically, one patch and one compatibility improvement at a time. Germany's state of Schleswig-Holstein completed its transition away from Microsoft tools to Linux and LibreOffice in public offices, finalized as of April 2024. France's National Gendarmerie has operated over 103,000 computers on Ginbuntu, a custom Ubuntu-based Linux distribution, for years. Denmark's Ministry of Digital Affairs announced a transition from Microsoft to open-source platforms, scheduled between June and November 2025. According to the U.S. Digital Analytics Program, which measures operating system usage among visitors to federal government websites, Linux accounted for 6% of desktop OS usage as of August 2025, placing it above macOS in that specific measurement context. These moves matter for a reason that goes beyond the raw numbers. When national governments deploy Linux at institutional scale, they validate it for every organization watching from the sidelines. They drive investment in support infrastructure, compatible software, and training, which makes Linux more capable and accessible for everyone downstream. And they represent procurement decisions that flow away from Microsoft, permanently, not temporarily. The Linux operating system market as a whole is projected to grow from approximately $21.97 billion in 2024 to $99.69 billion by 2032, according to Fortune Business Insights, data cited by multiple industry sources. The bulk of that growth is in cloud infrastructure and enterprise servers, where Linux has dominated for over a decade. But the spillover into desktop computing is real and accelerating. Microsoft is not standing still. Windows 11 has introduced AI-powered features through its Copilot integration. The Copilot Plus PC initiative targets new hardware with dedicated AI processing chips. Microsoft is pushing into cloud-connected services, tying Windows more tightly to OneDrive, Xbox Game Pass, and its broader productivity ecosystem. But these moves have also generated friction with users. Complaints about advertising appearing in the Windows Start menu, requirements to create or use a Microsoft account during setup, persistent data telemetry collection, and AI, features that many users did not ask for, have been widely reported by publications including The Verge and Tom's Guide. The perception among a growing segment of users is that Windows is being designed around Microsoft's commercial interests, as much as or more than around user preference. Here's the structural problem for Microsoft, and it is worth stating clearly. Microsoft can design Windows however it wants. It can set upgrade requirements. It can push Copilot into every corner of the interface. What it cannot do is influence what goes into the Linux kernel. It cannot block Luke Jones's patches. It cannot stop Valve from improving Proton and extending SteamOS to ASUS hardware. It cannot reverse the decisions of European governments to move their institutions onto open-source software. It cannot bring back the 200 million Windows 10 machines it effectively pushed off its platform. The forces driving Linux adoption are in large part outside Microsoft's ability to address. And that's the real story here. Not that Windows is about to collapse. It is not. Windows holds approximately 71% of the global desktop market as of 2025, according to StatCounter data cited by Wikipedia's OS market share tracking page. That dominance is not dissolving overnight, but the conditions that made Windows the only serious option for most users, conditions that held for 30 years, are eroding. Slowly, steadily, and in ways that cannot be reversed by a marketing campaign or a feature update. If you own an ASUS ROG or TUF laptop and have been curious about Linux, the honest answer in 2026 is that it works substantially better than it has at any point in the past. The ASUSLinux.org project supports nearly all ROG and TUF models. With kernel 6.19 or later, the ASUS Armory driver ships in Mainline, meaning features like fan curves, panel modes, and TDP control are accessible without custom kernels on supported hardware. CachyOS, Fedora, and Arch Linux users on ASUS gaming hardware have reported solid functional setups out of the box on recent kernels. If you own a ROG Ally or ROG Ally X, SteamOS is installable and functional for single-player Steam gaming. The experience is not yet perfect. Full TDP control requires community plugins, and some multiplayer titles with anti-cheat remain off the table. But if your library is primarily single-player or compatible titles, multiple reviewers have found the SteamOS experience on the Ally to be genuinely better than Windows 11 for day-to-day handheld gaming use. If you are pushed off Windows 10 and your machine cannot run Windows 11, Linux Mint, Zorin OS, Ubuntu, and Fedora all offer maintained, secure, actively supported operating systems that run well on older hardware. They include full office suites, browsers, media tools, and communication apps. The transition takes time. The learning curve is real, but it is not as steep as it was 5 years ago, and the communities supporting new users are large and active. Bill Gates was wrong in 1999 when he dismissed Linux. He said it lacked central control, and that has always been true. But it turned out that the kind of distributed, open collaboration that Linux embodies produced something remarkably durable. Linux now runs the servers that power most of the internet. It runs the Android phones in billions of pockets. It runs the world's fastest supercomputers. And now, quietly but measurably, it is running on the gaming laptops and gaming handhelds sold by one of the biggest hardware manufacturers in the world. ASUS has not issued a press release about this. There has been no formal partnership, no product launch, no official pivot. What has happened is more durable than any of those things. Hardware support has been built into the Linux kernel itself, by a developer working in the open, reviewed by the community, and shipped to hundreds of millions of users automatically. It is a reckoning, and the people who should take it most seriously are the ones who built a 30-year monopoly on the assumption that the alternative would never be good enough.